The porcelain teacup shattered against the palace wall. Queen Elizabeth II had never thrown anything in her life, never raised her voice, never lost control. But on this grey March morning in 1976, the Queen of England stood trembling with rage in her private study, staring at the newspaper headline that would haunt the monarchy for decades: Princess Margaret's secret affair with married man exposed. The photograph below showed her younger sister Margaret laughing intimately with Roddy Llewellyn, a landscape gardener 17 years her junior, on the beaches of Mustique. Their bodies pressed close, his hand on her waist, her head thrown back in carefree abandon. How could she be so reckless? Elizabeth thought, her white-gloved hands clenching the newspaper until her knuckles showed through the silk. How could she forget what we owe to the crown? The door burst open without a knock, something that never happened. Margaret swept in wearing a flowing caftan, her dark hair wild from the Caribbean sun, still tanned and defiant. "Lilibet, darling, I can explain." "Can you?" Elizabeth's voice was arctic. She'd never spoken to Margaret like this. Not when they were children playing in the corridors of Windsor. Not during the war when they huddled together during air raids. Not even during Margaret's first scandal with Peter Townsend 20 years ago. Margaret stopped mid-stride. She'd expected tears, pleading, the usual royal damage control. Not this cold fury radiating from her sister like winter fog off the Thames. "The Prime Minister has already called twice," Elizabeth continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Archbishop of Canterbury is demanding an audience. The newspapers are calling you a disgrace to the crown. And what do you call me, sister?" The question hung between them like a blade. Elizabeth studied Margaret's face, still beautiful at 45, still the rebel princess who'd captivated a nation, still the woman who'd sacrificed her first great love for duty only to throw it all away for a man young enough to be her son. "I call you lost," Elizabeth said finally. Margaret's composure cracked. "Lost? I'm the only one in this family who's ever been truly alive. While you've buried yourself in duty and protocol, I've actually lived. You've embarrassed us." Elizabeth's words fell like stones. "Your husband, your children, the institution that our father died protecting. Don't you dare bring Papa into this." Margaret's voice rose to a shout. "He's not here to see what his precious monarchy has become, a prison wrapped in ermine and gold." Elizabeth flinched as if slapped. Their father, King George VI, had never wanted to be king. The crown had fallen to him when his brother Edward abdicated for love, and the stress had killed him at 56. His last words to Elizabeth had been about duty, about the weight she would carry. "You think I don't know what it costs?" Elizabeth's voice cracked for the first time. "You think I don't know what I've sacrificed? I was 25 when I became queen. 25, Margaret. I gave up everything. Privacy, choice, the luxury of making mistakes. Then why won't you let me have something for myself?" "Because it's not just about you," Elizabeth exploded, all her royal composure finally shattering. "It's never been just about you. Every scandal, every headline, every photograph reflects on all of us, on the crown that millions of people still believe in." Margaret stood frozen. She'd never seen her sister lose control, never heard her voice rise above the carefully modulated tone drilled into them since childhood. "When you were photographed with Peter Townsend," Elizabeth continued, her voice shaking, "I had to choose between my sister's happiness and my duty as queen. Do you know what that did to me? Do you know I still dream about the look on your face when I told you the answer was no? Then why are you doing it again?" Margaret whispered. "Because you're not choosing between love and duty anymore, Margaret. You're choosing between scandal and responsibility. Roddy Llewellyn isn't Peter Townsend. He's a fortune hunter half your age who's already sold his story to the press." Margaret's face went white. "That's not true." Elizabeth reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a contract, throwing it across the mahogany surface. "He signed with the Sunday Mirror 3 days ago. Full exclusive on your intimate Caribbean getaway for £50,000. The paper fluttered to the floor between them like a wounded bird. Margaret stared at it, her world crumbling with the same slow-motion horror of a building collapse. "He wouldn't," she breathed. "He already has." Elizabeth's voice was gentle now, the fury replaced by something infinitely sadder. "Margaret, you're my sister, my only sister. I would give anything to protect you from this pain, but I can't protect the crown from you anymore." Margaret sank into the leather chair across from Elizabeth's desk, suddenly looking every one of her 45 years. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you have a choice to make. End this relationship publicly. Issue a statement about your commitment to your royal duties, and we weather this storm together. Or," Elizabeth's next words came out barely above a whisper, each one like a dagger to her own heart, "or I strip you of your royal allowance and remove you from the line of succession. You'll keep your title, But you'll be on your own. The silence stretched between them like the years of misunderstanding, like all the times Margaret had felt overshadowed by her perfect sister, like all the times Elizabeth had envied Margaret's freedom to be human. Margaret looked up, tears streaming down her face. You would do that? To your own sister? Elizabeth's composure finally broke completely. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, I have to. Don't you see? If I don't protect the crown, who will? If I can't sacrifice my own happiness for duty, how can I ask it of anyone else? Margaret stood slowly, moving to the window that overlooked the palace gardens where they'd played as children. The same gardens where they'd hidden from their governess, where they'd shared secrets and dreams, where they'd been just Lilibet and Margaret Rose before the world demanded they become queen and princess. Do you remember? Margaret said softly. When we used to pretend we were ordinary girls, we'd sneak down to the kitchens and Mrs. Thompson would give us biscuits and tell us stories about her own daughters? Elizabeth nodded, unable to speak. I still pretend sometimes, Margaret continued. I pretend I'm just Margaret Windsor, free to love who I choose, free to make mistakes without destroying centuries of tradition. She turned from the window, her decision written in the set of her shoulders. I'll end it, she said quietly. I'll issue the statement. I'll do my duty. Elizabeth felt no victory, only the hollow ache of another sacrifice demanded by the crown she served. Margaret, I know. Margaret held up her hand. Don't apologize. Don't explain. We both know this is how it has to be. We've always known. She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the ornate handle. But Lilibet, when you're lying in bed at night, surrounded by all that duty and protocol, remember that I was the one who chose love, even if I couldn't keep it. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Elizabeth alone with the newspaper headline and the broken pieces of her teacup. She knelt carefully, gathering the fragments in her palm, each piece sharp enough to draw blood. Outside, the March wind rattled the windows of Buckingham Palace, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed the hour. The same bells that had rung for her coronation, that would ring for her funeral, that marked the endless passage of time for a woman who belonged not to herself, but to history. Elizabeth Rossov walked to her desk and began to write the press statement that would end her sister's second chance at love. Her pen moved steadily across the royal letterhead, each word a small death, each sentence another brick in the wall that separated the Windsors from the rest of humanity. But as she wrote, she thought about Margaret's last words, and for the first time in her 24-year reign, Queen Elizabeth II wondered if her sister, reckless, scandalous, heartbroken Margaret, might be the braver of the two. The story broke the next morning. Princess Margaret ends relationship with Roderick Llewellyn. The photographs showed Margaret leaving her London home, composed and dignified, every inch the royal princess, but those who knew her could see the truth in her eyes, that some battles are won by surrendering, and some victories feel exactly like defeat. Years later, historians would call it a turning point for the modern monarchy, the moment when private happiness was definitively sacrificed on the altar of public duty. But for two sisters who'd once shared everything, it was simply the day they learned that love, even between family, sometimes isn't enough to bridge the gap between who we are and who the world demands us to be. And that's the story of how a queen chose her crown over her sister's heart, and how sometimes the heaviest burden isn't the one you carry, but the one you force others to put down.